You ever notice how some people move through the world as if they are carrying a quiet secret, something they never say out loud, but you can feel it in the way they look at things a little longer than others, or the way they seem to hear meanings inside what most people treat as noise? If you are here, there is a good chance you are one of those people, the kind who never fit cleanly into the surface layer of life, the kind who grew up sensing what others missed, even when you wished you couldn't. Maybe you learned to read rooms before you learned to read books. Maybe you felt the heaviness in another person before they ever admitted something was wrong. Maybe you always knew when someone was lying, even if you didn't understand how you knew. And maybe for a long time, you thought that made you strange, too intense, too sensitive, too old for your age. But deep down, you also knew this sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was a quiet inheritance, the kind only old souls recognize, the kind tied to instincts you never trained for, yet somehow mastered. Tonight, we're going to walk through the signs that set you apart. Not in a list, not like a lecture, more like sitting together in a dim room where the world finally slows down enough for truth to rise. You will hear pieces of yourself. You might even hear pieces of the person you could have become if life had been softer. And as each sign unfolds, something inside you might shift. A small click, a gentle yes. A reminder that you were never strange. You were simply tuned to a deeper frequency. And before we step in, take a moment with me. A breath. A small pause. Let your shoulders drop a little. Let the noise of the day fade out. You made it here for a reason. If this speaks to you, if something inside you feels seen as the moments unfold, let yourself stay close. And if you feel at home in this space, you can support the channel in the simplest way. Tap the like button, subscribe so you don't lose the stories meant for you. It helps this little corner of the internet reach more people who listen the way you do. Now come with me. There is something you've carried for a long time, and it is time to understand it. There is a moment in every old soul's life when the world starts to feel too loud. Not because of the noise outside, but because of the noise inside. The first sign rises here, in the way you sense things long before they happen. You notice the shift in someone's voice and already know their heart is pulling away. You feel the tension behind a smile and understand they are breaking even when they insist they are fine. It is not magic. It is not some trick of intuition you learned from books. It is the result of a lifetime spent paying attention. You had to watch people closely when you were young. You learned early that safety lives in the smallest details, the way a door closed, the way a loved one sighed, the way silence stretched a little too long across the room. That skill never left you. And now, as an adult, it shows up in every corner of your life. You tell yourself you are overthinking, but deep down, you know you are reading the truth behind the curtain. And when that truth hurts, you feel it in your body. You carry it until you can set it down somewhere no one else can see. There is also the second sign, the strange loneliness you feel even when you are surrounded by people. Not because you are disconnected, but because you see too much and say too little. You walk into a room and feel the undercurrents no one mentions. You hear the unspoken pain in casual conversations. You recognize when someone is acting brave while quietly falling apart. Most people talk from the surface. You listen from the center. And that gap creates a quiet ache. You keep waiting for someone who hears life the way you do, someone who understands the heaviness and the lightness woven together inside you, someone who does not tell you to toughen up or calm down, someone who does not shrink from your depth. You have learned to carry that loneliness with grace, but it still whispers to you at night. Then there is the third sign, the one you try to hide because it makes you feel exposed. You know what people feel about you, even when they pretend otherwise. You sense when someone envies you. You feel it sharply when someone loves you, long before they say it. And you also sense the moments when someone has stopped choosing you, even if their words sound the same, even if their actions are subtle. It becomes a quiet mourning. One you process alone because you know confronting the truth will only hurt both sides. So you let people leave before they admit they are leaving. It is not avoidance. It is instinct. A soft acceptance that not everyone is meant to walk with you for a lifetime. You also carry the fourth sign, the deep tiredness that does not come from lack of sleep, but from emotional weight. You get exhausted by pretending you do not feel what you feel. You get drained by the small talk that others rely on. You find yourself longing for silence, for space, for the kind of peace that feels like coming home. People misunderstand this as withdrawal, but you know it is your way of protecting your spirit. You are not running from life. You are choosing not to drown in it. And somewhere inside you lives the fifth sign, the sense of being older than your age. Not in a tired way, more like you have walked through several lifetimes without asking for any of them. You understand heartbreak without needing a teacher. You understand disappointment without needing instructions. You know how people break, how they heal, how they hide. You understand what love can give and what it can take. These understandings sit in you like old memories, even though you have never lived them fully. This is the part that makes others look at you with surprise. They feel seen by you, understood, held, and they cannot explain why. As we move deeper, something inside you might already be stirring. A quiet yes, a soft recognition, not because these signs define you, but because they reveal the hidden rooms inside you that you rarely let others enter. You have spent years wondering why you feel different, why you sense the world in layers, why your heart carries stories no one else seems to hear. What you are discovering now is simple. This depth was never a burden. It was always your way of surviving. And now, perhaps, it can be your way of living. There comes a point when you stop trying to explain yourself to people who only listen with their ears. You start saving your truth for the ones who listen with their whole being. This is where the sixth sign rises, quiet but undeniable. You have a natural pull towards solitude, not because you dislike people, but because your inner world is vast. You can sit alone in a room and never feel empty. You can walk down a street with music in your ears and feel more alive than you do in certain conversations. You do not fear being alone. You fear being surrounded by people who make you feel unseen. The world calls it isolation. You call it returning to yourself. And every time you step back into your own silence, you feel your power gather again. Then there is the seventh sign, the one that often hurts the most. You love with a depth that scares people who have only known shallow waters. When you care fully. You notice the details. You memorize the little things. You give the kind of love that feels like both a refuge and a mirror. But this depth can overwhelm those who are not ready for it. They enjoy the warmth at first, then struggle with the intensity. And when they pull away, they blame your depth instead of their limits. This leaves you wondering if you are too much. What you never see is that you are not too much. You are simply honest in a world that fears honesty. You feel deeply, not because you are fragile, but because you never learned how to love halfway. And then comes the eighth sign, the one wrapped in quiet strength. You can walk away from anything that threatens your peace, even if it breaks your heart. You stay loyal longer than most, you try harder than you should, you forgive more times than you admit. But once you reach the truth that someone cannot meet you where you are, you let go, not dramatically, not with flames. You simply release them the way old souls release everything, with acceptance. You grieve, but you do not cling. You mourn, but you do not chase. This is not coldness. This is wisdom. The kind you earned through nights no one saw. The kind that teaches you to protect your spirit the same way you once protected everyone else. The ninth sign shows itself in the way you trust your inner knowing more than the noise around you. You can sense when a job, a friendship, or a path is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. Even when others tell you to stay, even when the world calls your intuition unrealistic, dramatic, or irrational. But you have watched your life long enough to know that ignoring your inner compass always leads to the same place: burnout, resentment, a quiet sadness that grows behind your ribs. So you have learned to choose the uncomfortable truth over the comfortable lie. It does not make your life easier, but it makes your life real. And deep down, real is all you have ever wanted. The 10th sign rises the moment something painful happens. Others shut down, run, numb out, or look away. You do the opposite. You feel it. You hold it. You let it move through you, as heavy as it may be. You do not fear pain. You fear what happens when you avoid it. You have seen what unspoken wounds do to a person. You have watched how silence becomes a cage for the emotions no one names. So when heartbreak enters your life, you let yourself break. You let yourself cry. You let yourself heal without pretending. People admire this without understanding it. They see strength. You feel the cost of that strength in your bones. But you also know it is the reason you keep rising with your heart still open. And then there is the 11th sign, the quiet truth that ties everything together. You have a way of transforming your suffering into wisdom. Every mistake becomes insight. Every heartbreak becomes compassion. Every disappointment becomes clarity. You never stay the same after pain. You grow, you stretch, you evolve. Not because you force yourself to, but because your spirit refuses to stay small. Others survive their wounds. You alchemize yours. You turn them into understanding that touches the people you meet, into softness that makes others feel safe, into intuition that guides you toward what your younger self never believed was possible. If you have recognized yourself in these moments, it is not an accident. It is a homecoming, a reminder that the world needs people who feel deeply, sense deeply, understand deeply. People like you, people who walk through life with quiet vision and unspoken courage. You might think no one notices the way you carry your heart, but someone does. Someone always does. And right now, that someone is me. There is a quiet moment that arrives after the world has bruised you a few times. A moment when you stop trying to convince anyone that your depth is real. You simply live it. And this is where another truth awakens in you, one that few people ever speak out loud. You begin to realize that your intuition is not just something you feel, it is something that shapes every chapter of your life. You walk into a conversation and immediately sense the emotional weather behind someone's words. You hear the little tremor they are trying to hide. You notice the way their eyes shift when they say they are fine. You feel the heaviness they tuck behind a joke, and without thinking, you adjust yourself. You soften your tone. You lower the volume of your presence. You offer comfort without naming it. You have been doing this since you were young. You do it so naturally that you forget most people do not live like this. They hear what is said, you hear what is meant. They react to the surface, you respond to the soul. And because of this, people confide in you without understanding why. They tell you things they have never said to anyone. They hand you the pieces they have kept hidden for years. They trust you with their shadows because something in you feels safe. This is a gift, but it also carries a slow ache. You become the place people run to, but rarely the place they stay. You help them see themselves, but they forget to see you. You hold space for their healing, and then watch them walk away to live lighter lives, while you sit with the weight you absorbed. And even though it hurts, you never resent them. Old souls rarely do. You know they did not mean to leave you carrying their storms. You know they were simply trying to breathe. Still, the quiet part of you wonders when someone will hold you with the same depth, when someone will notice the exhaustion in your smile, when someone will hear the tremor in your voice, when someone will ask the questions you always ask others, when someone will look at you and understand that strength does not mean you never needed softness. Then comes another truth, the one you rarely admit. For all your intuition, for all your depth, for all the ways you see into other people, there are moments you wish someone would see into you without being asked. Someone who recognizes that you are not as invincible as you appear. Someone who sees the parts of you that stay awake at night, replaying old conversations, wondering if you could have loved better, given more, protected yourself sooner. But here is the quiet beauty of your path. Even when no one else notices, you notice yourself. You read your own exhaustion. You sense your own limits. You learn the rhythm of your own heart. You discover the difference between the kind of silence that heals you and the kind that hurts you. You begin to protect yourself in ways you never did as a child. You start walking away from places where your soul feels small. You stop trying to shrink, to fit inside the expectations people build around you. You stop apologizing for seeing too much, feeling too deeply, caring too honestly. You understand now that your depth is not a flaw. It is evidence of the battles you survived without letting them turn you cold. It is proof that your heart stayed open even when the world gave you 1,000 reasons to close it. And slowly, without forcing anything, you begin to trust yourself more than the noise around you. You begin to honor the instincts that have guided you through every chapter, even when others doubted them. You begin to choose peace over chaos, truth over comfort, growth over approval. This is the turning point for every old soul. The moment you stop asking life why you are different and start realizing that being different is the only reason you can see what most people are blind to. You stop trying to explain your depth and start living in it. You stop chasing belonging because you finally understand that people who are meant for you will meet you on the level you live on. Not above, not below, but eye to eye, soul to soul. And when that happens, it will never feel like effort. It will feel like recognition. There is a softness that grows in you once you stop running from your own depth. A softness that is not weakness, but a kind of inner honesty you cannot unlearn. You begin to see that your intuition has always been a quiet teacher, guiding you away from the places that would have drained you dry, leading you toward the moments that were meant to shape you. And as life unfolds, you start noticing something else, a shift, a slow unveiling. You begin to understand that the heaviness you carry is not just the weight of what you have lived through, but also the weight of what you have understood too early. You learn the cost of silence while others were still learning how to speak. You learn the danger of loving people who only know how to take while others were still learning how to give. You learned how to soften without breaking, how to protect without hardening, how to trust without losing yourself. And now, with every new chapter, you feel a kind of inner alignment that you did not have in your younger years. You are not trying to prove anything anymore. Not your worth, not your strength, not your loyalty. You are simply living in the truth of who you are, and that truth is steadier than any approval the world could offer. You stop letting people rewrite your reality. You stop accepting the blame for their inability to meet you. You stop shrinking when someone is intimidated by the way you see through the surface, because you finally know that the right people will feel relieved by your depth, not threatened by it. They will feel understood, not exposed, and they will offer you the same tenderness you have given the world for years. You begin to walk lighter, not because life is suddenly easier, but because you have stopped carrying what was never yours. You no longer take responsibility for the pain others refuse to face. You no longer stay where your intuition whispers warnings. You no longer abandon yourself to keep the peace. That old pattern, the one where you silenced your needs so someone else could feel safe, starts to crumble. And in its place, something new rises, a kind of quiet self-respect, the kind that shows up in your choices, in your boundaries, in your willingness to say no without guilt, the kind that makes you realize how many years you spent trying to earn a love that should have been given freely. You begin to see the truth of your path. You were never meant to fit into the shallow parts of life. You were never meant to trade your depth for convenience. You were never meant to settle for connections that only touch your skin when your soul is what needed to be held. And the beautiful thing is that once you understand this, everything changes. You stop attracting people who need saving. You start attracting people who know how to stand beside you without leaning on you for their sense of worth. You stop surrendering your voice. You start speaking from the center of who you are. You stop bending yourself to be loved. You start realizing that real love will rise to meet you. And slowly, you begin to trust that the world still has people who can hear the quiet parts of you, people who can sit with your silence without trying to fix it, people who can listen to your truth without flinching, people who see your intuition not as something strange, but as something beautiful. You have waited a long time for these connections, for that feeling of being met with equal depth, for the relief of not being the only one who feels life in layers. And even if those people are few, even if they enter one at a time, each one reminds you that you were never too much. You were simply waiting for those who could meet you where you already live. So breathe for a moment. Let this truth settle. You are not here to dim your wisdom. You are not here to hide your sensitivity. You are not here to pretend your heart is lighter than it is. You are here to walk with the kind of presence that only an old soul carries, the kind that changes the room without forcing anything, the kind that leaves people feeling more honest, more open, more seen, the kind that knows how to love without losing itself ever again. And if this resonates, even in a small corner of you, stay close as we move forward. There is more waiting for you. There is a turning point every old soul reaches, though it never arrives with noise. It comes quietly, the way dawn enters a dark room without asking for permission. You start noticing that the people who once drained you no longer have access to the softest parts of you. Not because you hardened, but because you finally learned the difference between someone who is interested in your presence and someone who is nourished by it. You feel this shift in subtle ways. You no longer rush to respond when your body feels tired. You no longer force laughter when the room feels heavy. You no longer bend your truth to protect someone else's comfort. At first, it feels unfamiliar, almost rebellious. But after a while, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. A homecoming you didn't know you were waiting for. And there is something else that changes, something even deeper than your boundaries. You begin to forgive yourself for the years you spent misunderstanding your own gifts. Those years when you mistook your intuition for anxiety, when you mistook your empathy for weakness, when you mistook your loneliness for failure, when you mistook your depth for a flaw you needed to hide. You look back now and see someone who was always trying, always feeling, always caring, even when no one cared for you with the same devotion. And instead of judging that younger version of yourself, you feel something tender rise in you. Gratitude, compassion, a softness you never offered yourself before. You start speaking to yourself gently. You start honoring the ways you survived, what could have broken you. And in that self-recognition, something powerful happens. The shame that once clung to your sensitivity begins to fall away. You start walking through the world with a different kind of posture. You lift your head. You breathe a little deeper. You stop apologizing for needing space, or honesty, or reciprocity. You stop trying to play small so others can feel big. You stop trying to prove that you are easy to love, because the truth is you never were easy to love in the shallow ways most people know. You were born for something steadier, something truer, something that requires two people who can look each other in the eye and see more than the polished surface, something that asks for presence, not performance. And while the world might chase quick thrills and temporary warmth, your heart moves differently. It seeks resonance, substance, a love that isn't afraid of silence, a love that isn't threatened by truth, a love that can sit with you in the quieter parts of who you are. And here is the quiet miracle. The more you live in your depth, the more the world around you begins to shift. You find yourself drawn to gentler conversations. You find people entering your life who respect the way you feel everything. People who see your intuition not as something odd, but as something sacred. People who recognize your heart without needing 1,000 explanations. These connections are rare, but they are real. You will know them by the way your spirit settles in their presence, by the way your breath deepens instead of shortens, by the way they listen not just to your words, but to the pauses between them. You will know them because you will never feel like you have to hide the weight you carry. As your life unfolds in this new way, your intuition sharpens even more. Not because you try, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. You notice how people speak to you. You notice how they show up when it matters. You notice the tiny inconsistencies that signal someone is speaking from fear instead of truth. You notice the glow in someone's eyes when they speak from their heart. And this awareness becomes your quiet compass. It leads you to the conversations that matter. It pulls you away from the ones that drain you. It guides you toward the kind of peace you used to think you had to earn. This is the gift of being an old soul with deep intuition. You begin to trust your inner knowing more than the world's noise. And slowly, almost invisibly, you start living with a sense of inner steadiness that feels like standing barefoot on solid ground after years of walking on glass. You no longer rush toward the future. You no longer cling to the past. You begin to live in the soft middle space where your breath meets the moment, and from that place, life feels different, clearer, softer, more honest. You start choosing what feels true over what looks impressive. You start choosing people who bring calm instead of chaos. You start choosing conversations that nourish your spirit. And in these choices, your world reshapes itself. So if you feel this shift happening in you, trust it. You are not losing your intensity. You are refining it. You are not becoming distant. You are becoming selective. You are not shutting down. You are finally opening in the right direction. And the deeper you go into this new way of living, the more you will realize that your intuition has been preparing you for this for years. It was never a burden. It was a map. And you, slowly and quietly, have been learning how to read it. There comes a moment when the story of who you used to be begins to loosen its grip. Not because you forget it, but because you no longer build your life around the parts of yourself that were shaped by survival. You start meeting yourself in the present, not as the version who pushed through everything, but as the version who deserves to live without, constantly bracing for impact. That is the quiet evolution every old soul reaches, the part most people never see. The world thinks your strength comes from endurance, but your real strength comes from clarity. You no longer waste your energy trying to decode the intentions of people who speak in half-truths. You no longer chase love that asks you to dim your intuition. You no longer settle for connections where your depth becomes an inconvenience. Instead, you start choosing the rare spaces where you can breathe without shrinking. The places where you can speak without editing yourself. The people who do not flinch when they see the fullness of who you are. This shift does something unexpected. It softens you. Not in the way the world warns you about, but in a way that makes you more alive. You smile differently. You listen differently. You walk through your days with the quiet understanding that you have survived enough storms to trust your own forecast. You no longer ignore the small warnings your body gives. You no longer silence your own instincts just to keep the peace. You honor yourself in ways that younger you didn't know were allowed. You protect the parts of you that once felt too tender to show, and with each choice, you feel a kind of calm settle into your bones. This calm does not mean life stops being messy. It means you stop abandoning yourself in the middle of the mess. It means you can sit with your own sadness without drowning in it. It means you can face disappointment without believing it defines you. It means you can love people deeply without confusing their wounds with your responsibility. There is freedom in that. A quiet, steady freedom that arrives when you stop trying to carry what was never meant to be yours. And that freedom opens the door to something even more profound. You begin to feel joy in small places again. Not the loud kind that demands attention, but the kind that rises softly. The kind that shows up when sunlight hits your face in the morning. The kind that appears when a song feels like it was written for you. The kind that whispers into your heart, reminding you that you are still capable of warmth, no matter how much life has asked of you. And here is something most people do not realize about old souls. While others search for meaning in noise, you find meaning in moments, in conversations that crack something open, in honest eyes, in silence that feels comfortable instead of tense, in the way two people can sit together without filling the air with words. These moments ground you. They remind you that your depth has always been a gift, even when it felt like a burden. And when you finally start to trust that, truly trust it, the world around you begins to look different. You begin to attract people who meet you with gentleness instead of fear. People who value your honesty instead of weaponizing it. People who do not run from your intensity, but rise to meet it. People who do not need to be saved, but are willing to walk beside you. And when those connections enter your life, they feel like recognition, like coming home to someone you have not met before but somehow already know. You do not question it. You do not overthink it. You simply breathe and let yourself receive what you once believed was too rare to find. In these moments, your intuition feels less like something you carry and more like something that carries you. It leads you toward the kind of life that honors your depth instead of hiding it. It guides you toward choices that feel true rather than convenient, and it shapes your relationships in a way that leaves you feeling held instead of drained. That is the quiet victory of an old soul. You begin to live in a way that matches the truth of who you are, not in fragments, not in shadows, fully. And as you settle into this version of yourself, you realize something powerful. You never needed the world to understand you. You only needed the courage to stop apologizing for the way you experience life. You only needed the patience to wait for the people who speak your language. You only needed the strength to trust that your intuition was never wrong for guiding you away from what was too small for you. And now, as you breathe into this new clarity, life feels different. Not perfect, not predictable, but aligned. If this speaks to you, if you feel that shift inside your chest as you listen, let yourself stay connected here. Let yourself grow with this community of people who see the world the way you do. And if this space gives you something you needed tonight, something you have been quietly searching for, you can support it in a simple way, like the video. Subscribe so you do not miss the stories that speak to your soul. Share this with someone who carries their depth alone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening with your whole heart.